Welcome to PCMag's One Cool Thing. I am PCMag's mobile analyst, Iyaz Akhtar, along with PCMag's managing editor for consumer electronics, Eric Zeman. And today's One Cool Thing has got to be the Apple event. Eric, what do you think out of that entire event is like the biggest, coolest thing that came out of it?
Well, of course, Apple announced a whole bunch of different products, but the biggest product was the iPhone 15. And the biggest thing of the iPhone 15 was the switch in charging ports from Lightning to USB-C, which is an industry standard that's been around for quite a while.
Yeah, Lightning's been around for far too long, but it also was one of the first reversible cables you could use. USB-C also reversible. But the thing is, the USB-C ports on the iPhone 15 and Pro are different, right?
That is right. The iPhone 15 and 15 Plus, which are the lower cost models, are limited to USB 2 speeds in terms of data transfer, while the Pro and Pro Max models are can choose USB 3 speeds, which is much faster. We're talking 480 megabits per second versus
10 gigabits per second.
10 gigabits per second.
Which is over 20 times faster. So if you're looking to move some of that beautiful 4K video from one thing to another, you might want to be looking at your USB-C speeds, which is kind of a strange thing. They're going to have to educate the customer about this. Apple's really quite good about that. Do you think they're going to have to fight any backlash from moving away from the Lightning environment that they've had for a long time?
I think they'll face the same backlash that they did when they switched from the 30-pin connector back in 2012 to the Lightning port. There's a legacy number of devices that will have the old connector that will have to make the switch over. It's just a matter of time. I think the market is ready, though. There are already dozens and dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of products that have USB-C.
So we've got Dynamic Island on every single iPhone 15. It doesn't matter if it's the 15, the Plus, the Pro, or the Pro Max. There's no Mini anymore, so forget about that. Do you think this change it's just a stylistic change, or does this mean something bigger?
I think there's a little bit of a parity thing. I think Apple's bringing most of the upper end experience to the lower cost phones. And I think this was something that's specifically enabled by porting in the A16 Bionic processor to the iPhone 15 family. And I think it's good because that means the software is the same across all four phones, and the basic user experience of dealing with notifications and other things like that will be the same.
Let's talk a little bit about the systems on a chip that are on each of these devices. A16 Bionic, which used to power the 14 Pro and Pro Max, is now in the 15 and 15 Plus. And then Apple introduced the A17 Pro, not an M series chip, and it's not a Bionic chip. It is, I believe, the first A series Pro device or system on a chip that's been out there. What could you imagine the benchmarking and speeds are going to be like for this A17 Pro, thinking about the A16 Bionic?
The A16 was one of the fastest mobile chips ever produced. Benchmarks for that chip were off the charts. Even the finest processor from Qualcomm struggled to, make the same marks, despite the differences in platforms being used to test them. However, the A17 is, according to Apple, multiple times faster, better NPU performance, better GPU performance. So we will see a boost in certain types of activities, in particular gaming.
Yeah, so Apple was spending a lot of time talking about gaming, which Apple and gaming when it comes to desktops, not really a thing. Mobile gaming is huge. They're talking about PC style or even console level, or one of the two, level gaming on these devices, on the Pro devices. Do you think we're actually going to see what Apple was claiming we're going to get? We're going to get like an Assassin's Creed game. We're going to see a couple of other AAA games, but is the future of mobile gaming on the Apple iPhone Pro?
Isn't it already, though? When you look at the offerings from Apple in the App Store, there's hundreds of thousands of games. My kids don't play games on any platform other than their smartphone, which I will admit is an iPhone. And if Apple is able to convert, gaming developers, which it seems to be able to do, to adopt this new platform, iPhone owners will be able to enjoy new things like ray tracing in their games, which is one of the new enhancements made available by the A17.
And that's supposed to give you more realistic lighting when you're looking at any games that have surfaces that scatter light, which is like anything unless it's like a cartoon. I wanted to talk a bit about the neural engine that's on the A16 Bionic and the A17 Pro, because a lot of the stuff that Apple was talking about is a smarter Siri that can do a lot more stuff on device, because the processor that's inside the 15 is the same that used to be in the 14 Pro and Pro Max. So this thing should be very powerful, as with the 17 Pro. Is Siri going to get smart enough on device that people will be able to use it as consistently as something like the Tensor that's on Google's devices?
Right, that's the big shift. We saw Google design its own processors based on machine learning so that they would be better at on-device processing, and we're now seeing that with Apple. I think Apple's playing a little bit of catch-up here. It saw the direction that Google was going, and processors that compete with Google's are also adopting more machine learning for on-device natural language processing. Apple had to take the same step, and I think that's a good move. The more that the iPhone and new watches are able to do on-device rather than talking to the cloud, does things like reduce latency and save battery life.
Do you think that the jump between the 14 and 15 was so great that anyone who's got a 14 should really be paying attention to the pricing and availability of the 15, or is the 14 to 15 not that big a jump?
I think it really depends. From the 14 to the 15, it's not an enormous jump, right? So especially for the lower cost models. The iPhone 15 and 15 Plus introduce a slightly better main camera sensor. They introduce the newer processor, but almost every other facet of the device is a carryover. Same screen size and resolution, same basic form factor, same radios, that all carries over. I think we're seeing a little bit more of a difference between the 14 Pro series and the 15 Pro series. We jump from stainless steel chassis to a titanium chassis that helps reduce weight. The screen has thinner bezels, so the device has slightly tighter dimensions. And of course, there's that big leap in camera technology.
So Apple's calling it a tetraprism, which I think is just code for a periscope camera, which means that theoretically light's bouncing inside instead of it being like this lens that's this long. So can you tell us about the tetraprism that's in the iPhone 15 Pro Max?
Yeah, so periscope cameras are nothing new on phones. Google and Samsung have been doing them for years. Again, this is a matter, I think, of Apple playing a little bit of catch up. I think, we saw the Google and Samsung phones were able to do 5 and 10x optical telephoto zooming, and Apple's device was limited to 3x. And so this year it made a big jump. The Pro Max device now goes up to 5x optical and up to 25x digital. So it's giving it a little bit more chops in the zoom range. And I think that was something Apple really needed to do to catch up to its rivals.
Yeah, I mean, generally though, the photography from Apple, Samsung, and Google has been pretty much, I wouldn't say beyond compare, but they're well ahead of a lot of other companies because they're also doing computational photography, which is helped by their systems on a chip. So I'm sure we're going to see some really cool things coming out of those cameras pretty soon. But we didn't talk about the Apple Watch. And I will say that this motion, I think, is one of the most important motions that's going to make a difference for Apple. You want to explain what I'm talking about, other than me having a mind loss here?
We're not squishing tiny heads. We are doing what Apple calls the double tap gesture. And what this does is it allows the Apple Watch
Series 9
through its new sensors and processor to take action based on the movements of your hand as you do this motion. Now, in order to do it successfully, you do have to raise your wrist. You have to raise your wrist and double tap your fingers. And then what you can do is interact with the main action, or is the action key, what it would do on the watch itself. So for some things, that's answering or ending calls, playing or pausing music, starting a timer, those types of actions. And Apple says the idea behind this is to allow people to do things one-handed when using the other hand would be inconvenient. For example, I was on the treadmill this morning and my watch did an auto tracking thing and said, "Hey, you're doing a treadmill workout. You want to record this?" And it was very awkward to break my cadence to do this. With the Apple Watch Series 9, a simple double tap would have solved that problem for me. Not that it's a huge problem.
Yeah, but that's to me, all I was seeing when I saw this double tap, getting people used to gestures. Obviously, Apple's done a lot of education with here's pinch and zoom, and here's how to turn things. Here's multi-touch gestures, and they've done a lot of explanation with this. The double tap. I mean, I want to go back even further, pulling down from different shades, which we've seen in Android. We've seen lots of this different stuff, a lot of education. When I saw the double tap, all I thought was Apple Vision Pro, getting people used to doing gestures in the air that's being tracked, and you're not even worried or thinking about it. They start off very small. So I think the Apple Watch is going to definitely teach a lot of people that, hey, I should be able to interact with things that way. Now, everyone who was screaming, didn't Android have this with Soli? They had a radar thing on the front of a Pixel 3, I want to say, or 4. Thank you, Pixel 4. Yeah, but that didn't really work out so great. Do you remember what happened to the Pixel 4?
We sure didn't see Soli again, did we?
No.
That vanished. So gestures are great. Gestures are a great way to interact with your devices. And yes, we got to learn them slowly over time. We can't be handed an entire alphabet or library of gestures to digest all at once.
You know, we're talking about the watch. We talked about the Pro. We forgot to mention that there's an action button now on the Pros. Can you explain what that is and what it's replacing?
So what Apple's doing here is removing the dedicated ringer switch that has been on every iPhone since 2007. Some people are probably going to be upset about this. It's an easy way to shut your ringer off so that the phone is silent, so put it in silent mode, which can be a lifesaver sometimes, especially in certain social circumstances. So what they're doing is replacing that with a dedicated action button that is customizable. So you can use this button and program it to do specific tasks. The default task is to silence the phone, but you can change it so that a hold and press will launch the camera or start a timer or end a call, those types of actions. Again, a gesture that simplifies a process and helps you move through your day faster.
I don't know if it's customizable with like double taps or triple taps or tap and hold. I want to see if they allow that level of customization eventually, but that usually is not Apple's first step. They go, here are the 2 things you can do, or the 10 things you can do, because it attaches to, it acts a lot like the Apple Watch action button does right now. So I'm looking forward to that customization. I just don't see it's going to happen anytime soon. And I wanted to get back to the Pro because of one last thing. The Pro devices, Apple claims, will have the ability to record spatial video by the end of the year. Spatial video is essentially 3D video that is viewable through an Apple Vision Pro headset, which allows you to look around what you just recorded. I find this to be a huge undertaking. I'm curious if the phone can actually do it. What do you think about spatial video recording on the Pros?
So of course, spatial video is another way of saying 3D, and we've seen 3D on phones before. HTC 10 years ago, 12 years ago, had 3D cameras on some of its Android smartphones.
Yep.
That was a very short-lived fad because there wasn't really a way to consume 3D content. Now, with virtual reality, augmented reality headsets, we do have a way to consume 3D content. So all the phone needs is 2 cameras. It has 3, so it should be able to, in concert, theoretically easily record 3D content. Apple just needs to come up with the right filing type to make it easily viewable and transferable to its Vision Pro headset.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big deal in the future, because if you're willing to spend $3,600, $3,500 on the Vision Pro, you're going to need something to watch. And if you're the ones making it with the Pro and the Pro Max, that's actually going to be another reason for people to get it in the future. Because I'm assuming, 3 or 4 years from now, every iPhone will have spatial video recording, and we'll get cheaper headsets. But we're not there yet.
Not there yet.
So we've got full reviews coming up for all of the devices we talked about at PCMag.com. So go there, check out our reviews. We researched the heck out of everything. So please check that out. Thank you, Eric. This has been very informative.
Thank you.